We've all heard of the Immortal Peace games, or like the Immortal Rook game or the Immortal Queen game or something like that, where a piece gets sacrificed over and over, but it cannot be taken because it leads to a devastating attack or even a checkmate. Well, today we have an Immortal Knight game, because not only could it have been taken for 6 turns, it would literally have not to let it to any counterplay. It was just straight hanging for 6 turns. This is such a bad game. This is when 1100s play like 500s. Let's get started. I do this e6 b6 setup, and he actually knows how to play against it. This is a common variation here. And this opening is pretty good, right? This is all kind of my prep. And now the prep is over, and you already know what's coming. You already know I hang the knight. Okay? But my opponent was like, oh, my rook's under attack. Now, if you take the knight, take this, it's still better for white because you traded an active bishop and an active knight for a rook that's doing nothing. So that's better for white, but white decides to not take that and just go rook a to b1. And I decide to capture this pawn, blundering my knight again. Knight takes, bishop takes, and now my knight is once again hanging, but white plays knight to f3. Okay, and it's the best move. Now I have 2 pieces hanging, the bishop and the knight. What am I going to do? I move the bishop out of the way, blundering the knight, but he does not take it. Instead, he goes bishop to e3. Alright. I castle, blundering the knight again. Bishop takes. Now, all my problems are solved because I can just take the bishop with the knight and everything is protected. But I take it with the pawn, blundering the knight again. And he plays knight to g5, just totally ignoring the knight. I play queen d7 attacking his knight, and he plays queen to h5. Now my knight is no longer hanging. Interestingly enough, he could have just played knight captures here, and after something like this, then he could take this knight and he wins the pawn. But he decides to just threaten checkmate like a baboon immediately. Alright, I play h6 attacking his knight. The knight goes back to f3. Knight to b4. I finally get this knight in the game. Alright, bring this knight in. Rook attacks the knight. Knight goes over here attacking the queen. Queen attacks knight. Knight goes back. Now here I had a nice little tactic that I also missed. Knight to e2, and no matter where the king goes, then I have this forking the rooks. I did not do that, and I decided to play the knight here. The knight could have been the real MVP, taking a rook down with it, but he goes to h4. I attack this pawn, he defends it, and I bring this knight back, planning to bring it over here to f5. Rook goes over here, pinning the pawn, and I just totally ignored this threat here. I should have just pushed my pawn up, but instead I just decided to blunder it. Rook goes up to b3, attacking his pawn. Knight attacks rook. I trade that, and then I take this pawn. So, all said and done, it's a pretty even game. He's got this dangerous passed pawn, and I have this passed pawn. Everything else is pretty even. He pushes pawn, and I block it with the queen. The rook moves up. And I go rook to h3, thinking, oh, if he pushes this pawn, I can just do this. But really, I had rook to a6 to go after this pawn, and just put a lot of pressure there, and take away his one advantage that he has. Queen goes to f4, and I'm like, oh, I'm so smart. I'm gonna pin his pawn and blunder the game. Pawn is defended by f3, and now I go rook to c8. Another missed win. Instead I have f5, which threatens to open up the white king pretty easily, and I would have this check to bring the queen in. Instead, I'm like, oh, I'm going to be moving the queen soon, so I'm going to have this rook block the pawn, right? Rook to e3, and I just push my pawn forward like an ape. I mean, this eval bar, just look at this eval bar, dude. It goes from even, and then just look at how much it jumps back and forth here. between even and white winning and black winning after these moves. Just look at the eval bar there. Rook c3, I check like this, trying to get my king in the game, or queen in the game. He moves his king up. Queen b2. Now here, I'm just totally hopeless. I'm trying to get my pawn forward. All he has to do is block with one of his rooks, and then I have nothing. But instead, he goes king to g3, giving me queen to h2 mate. And this is a game that nobody wanted to win.